I know that it has already been spoken this morning, but let's do it again. Happy New Year. 2022, we made it. We made it. So let's do it. Resolutions. Where's my resolution people at? Who's doing resolutions this year? That's okay. Be proud of it. Don't be ashamed. Where are they at? That tracks. Statistics say about 3 out of every 10 people do resolutions. But statistics also tell us that 6 out of every 10 people wish they could be better. So here's what I think. I think deep down we're all resolution people. I think some people didn't raise your hands today. You're a closet resolution person. It's okay. It's okay. You can keep hiding behind it. But I think deep down we are all resolution people because deep down we all desire change. The problem is we've got more excuses than resolutions. Now, I'm not judging, all right? I'm not judging. It's okay. But if you got one hard thing you're trying to change and you got 5 easy ways to get out of it, there just comes that moment in the middle of January where you're just like, you know what? Forget it. Just give me the cake, all right? It just happens, and I get it. But here's the issue with excuses. Despite the fact that they're easy, excuses never actually create change. And so when we look up the word, to change means to become different. And I don't know about you, but I think we could all use a little different in 2022. But man, that's hard. The struggle is real to create change. And so that's what I want to do today. I want to talk about change. I want to talk about real, actual change. So I don't want to talk about finances. I don't want to talk about health. I don't want to talk about relationships. I don't want to talk about jobs. I don't want to talk about education. Those things are great. But honestly, those things don't actually create change. What I want to do today is I want to talk about your heart. Because what has your heart has your life. And the only way to really change your heart is to wreck it. So that's what we're going to try to do today. So I want to tell a story. That's what I want to do. I want to tell one story today. It's a story about a father and a son. Now, when this story is spoken of during this time period, this story is so scandalous that the people in the crowd actually gasp at hearing what's happening in this moment. The story that I'm going to talk about a father and a son, it completely undermines all the categories that we have when it comes to understanding God. And ultimately, understanding ourselves. Because here's what's true about me and you. The most important thing about us is what we think about when we think about God. And so, we're going to jump into this. This isn't my story. This is Jesus' story, and he's the best, so let's hear what he has to say. Luke 15 starts off like this. There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me." And he, the father, divided his property between them. Now, if you're in the audience during this moment, this request by the son is ridiculous. It's actually offensive. In this culture, in order for a father to divide up his property and give the inheritance to his children, that father would have to be dead. So here's what the son is saying to the father. It would be better for me if you were dead. I don't really care about you. I just want your stuff. So give me your stuff. It's not even his stuff. It's the father's stuff. The son didn't do anything to earn this. The only reason he has access to this is because he is a child of the father. And so I've got kids, and this is one of my favorite things to do to my children, especially if they're not being good. So if we're having a hard day, and they're like, "Hey, Dad, can I have my iPad? Hey, Dad, can I have my toy? Hey, Dad, can I have this?" And I'll be like, "Wait, whose is it? Did you purchase that? I didn't know you had a job. You're 8 years old. I didn't know that you were able to legally work. When did you drive and pick this up?" "All right, Dad, all right." "Well, maybe I don't go that far." "Maybe I do. I won't disclose it all." But that's what's happening. The son is like, "I want your stuff, but I don't want you." Now listen, it's easy to start judging this brother, but you and I, we are cursed with this ideology. We are obsessed with self over substance. Isn't this the reason why we struggle so much? Like we're here in January and it's a new year and it's a new you and we're not even gonna touch those resolutions because we know what's gonna happen. There's gonna come a moment in your life where it's gonna be you over something better than you, whatever that is. And you and I are always gonna choose ourselves over our substance. You know, the problem with our resolutions is our excuses. It's like we said before, you know, we've got more excuses than we've got resolutions. And at some point, those excuses ultimately hide the truth that we don't want to talk about out loud, is that I just really want what I want. It's about me. And that's why we're so jacked up, and that's why we got so many issues happening, and that's why we never seem to make it to the end of January trying to change, because we get to that one point where life just gets hard and we're like, you know what, I just choose me. Just give me the stuff. And that's the situation that we're in. Like, this is out of control. In this culture, saying something like this to your father would warrant a beating. And in some spaces, it would actually warrant death. It's unbelievable. And what's even more outrageous than the request is the response. The father actually does it. He does what the son asks. I think this is crazy. So if you look up the Greek word for property, it means bios, which is life. So what the son is asking, he's asking the father to divide up his life. Now, again, in this culture, property is everything. So because he's not dead, the father's gonna have to sell some of his property in order to give the money to the son. And so your property was everything. Your property was your identity. Your property gave you standing in the community. It gave you influence in the community. If you didn't have property, you didn't have identity. So what the son is asking the father to do is to tear his life apart. And the father actually does it. So then we pick the story up and it says this: a few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. So brother goes to Vegas, and everybody hears that there's some new cash flow, and everybody rides that money train until the money train runs out of gas. And that's bad enough to waste your entire inheritance. But then Jesus tells us that a famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. It's so bad that the only job he can find, the only way he can figure out how to take care of himself, is to hire himself off as a servant. And the only job he's qualified to do is to feed pigs. And it's such a bad job that it says that the young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs with looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. If you want to know what desperate looks like, this is desperate. Face down in the dirt, where even desperation is unattainable. The brother wants to eat the pods that the pigs are eating, and he can't even get that. That is desperation. That is brokenness. And what we discover is this son is absolutely wrecked by his sin. Every decision he has made since he left home has been a decision that has ultimately led him to this point, and he is completely wrecked. There is no bottom. He's hit it. This is desperation. This is what it means to be absolutely wrecked by your sin. And I don't know if you caught it, but the father allowed it. Father didn't have to give him his inheritance. Could have looked in the face and said, no. Who do you think you are? It's like I said before, again, culturally, this was potentially punishable by death to make such a decree against your father. He didn't have to say yes to this, but he did. Because he knows what all parents know. And you don't even have to be a parent to understand this truth. You just need to be somebody who's responsible for somebody else. But as parents, we know this. There are moments where our kids are going to have to fall so they can learn how to stand, right? And our prayer is that when our kids do fall, that they don't fall so hard that it changes them in a negative way for the rest of their life. But this is how we learn, right? So the father, in his love, knowing what's gonna happen, knowing the heart of his younger son, obliges to the requests and allows him to go and chase after this because he knows what we know, and ultimately he knows what God knows. And here's the thing for some of us today is that for some of us, the most loving thing that God can do to change us is to let us run. And Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 1 where he says this, and this is talking about me and this is talking about you. It says they did know God. They did know God, but they did not honor him as God. They knew who God was, but they didn't honor him as God. They knew God, but they just wanted his stuff. And because of that, it says that they were not thankful to him and thought only of foolish things, and their foolish minds became dark, and they said that they were wise, but they showed how foolish they were. They gave honor to false gods that look like people who can die, and to birds and animals and snakes, and this honor belongs to God who can never die. So it's easy when we read the story to judge the brother, but this is our story. We are plagued with obsession of self over substance. And time again, we will always choose us over everything else, especially God. This is the sin that's inside of us that is wrecking us without us knowing it. And so what is God's response to us in these moments? Paul says, so God let them follow the desires of their sinful hearts. You know what? Run, go get it. Now you read this and you're like, that's cruel. Who is God that he would allow this to happen? He would allow us to pursue things that ultimately destroy us. And so we got to do some work to try to understand the scripture. So 7 chapters later in Romans 8, Paul says this, for the creation, you and me, was subject to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption, that for some of us, the only way we're gonna actually learn that what we're pursuing is not working, the only way we're gonna get our face in the mud and get sick and tired of being sick and tired is to chase after what God has said is futile. That all these things that we're pursuing, all these things that we're going after, in the end will just leave us bitter and broken. And until we've tasted enough of that bitterness, we're not gonna get there. But notice what Paul says, that these things are futile with hope that by getting to the end of it and realizing how futile it is, it would set us free from the bondage that we're in. And that's what we're in. We're in this bondage, this cycle, this loop of believing this lie. And so there's got to come this moment in your life and my life where we got to come to this truth and realize that our excuses aren't good enough anymore. That we can't hide behind our excuses because at some point they're gonna run out and they're gonna expose the truth about us is that we're a mess. And I think the reason why so many of us don't actually change, because we've sat in services like these. We've heard messages like these. Some of y'all in this room, like you know this story. You know how it's going to end. You've heard this, but nothing has changed in your life. It's because I think for most of us, we are not sick enough of our sin. We haven't been wrecked enough by it. We have not come to the end of ourselves, and we have not come to the end of our excuses. And here's the truth we need to understand. Until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, nothing's gonna happen in your life. Until the pain of staying right where you are, until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, nothing is gonna change in your life. And I get it. That's why we go for the excuses, because change hurts. And excuses are just easy. They're easy to accept. They're easy to hide behind. They're easy to chase after. And so if we're gonna actually change today, And that's what I'm going for. I'm going for real change. If we're gonna get to the heart, if we're gonna let the gospel wreck us, then we're gonna have to call out some excuses for what they are. We're gonna have to start with ourselves and let's just be honest. You're not the answer to your problems. Somewhere along the lines of us messing things up, we say, you know what's gonna help out? I'm just gonna be better. I'm gonna try the be better plan. Ever try the be better plan? How's it work? I'm just gonna do what I'm doing and try to do it better. How's that working out for you, boss? Here's what you know to be true. There is nobody in your life who has lied to you, hurt you, let you down, and deceived you more than you. Nobody has. And it doesn't matter who's drinking out of your coffee cup a week from now, a month from now, 10 years from now. That person you're looking at in the mirror, they're gonna let you down. They're gonna let you down. You are not the answer to your problems. And guess what? The people you share life with, they are also not the answer to your problems. You know what's worse than one broken person? Several. And somewhere along the lines, we play this Jerry Maguire game with our hearts, and we believe there's somebody out there that can complete us, whether it's a significant other, whether it's a friend, whether it's the right boss or the right coworker or the right coach, whatever it wants to be. And what we try to do is we try to put people in the savior position. And to put somebody, whether that's your friend, your spouse, or your kids in a position to be your savior is to put a weight on them that is unbearable, and it will completely wreck your relationships. All right? Well, I won't focus on relationships. I'll focus on stuff. I will focus on achievement. I will work hard. I will earn hard, and I will find my value in the accumulation of things. Well, your stuff will not satisfy. Now, I get it, right? Like on a bad day, a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream will do wonders for the soul. And a new phone, and new clothes, and a new car, that makes you feel real good for about a minute. But then it fades because all that is numb. It just numbs the real problem. And we sell out for it. Right? That's what we do for stuff, right? You're trading your time for things. And time is the most precious thing you have. You only get so much of it and it's gone. You can gain and lose stuff as much as you want. You can gain and lose people as much as you want, but you only have so much time on this earth. And what so many of us do is we take our precious time and we trade it for the stuff of future yard sales and junk yards. Listen, that overtime you work this Christmas to get that perfect gift, 5 years from now, some kid's gonna buy it for $5 out of your yard sale. And that's what we do. We chase after these things. And so we buy into this lie that what I need to be happy, what I need to fix myself is more of what I've already got. And we run this treadmill and we chase after this lie. And I'm here today begging you to stop. Stop chasing after it. Because here's the truth. For most of us in this room, the only thing that has actually been changing in your life is your excuses. So once one runs out, you just replace it with another, and then another, and then another. So God, in his grace and his love, says, you know what? Go get it, run. And you run until you run out of your excuses, because if we're ever gonna actually change, like really change, we have to feel the pain of the cost of staying the same, because there's a cost to it. Every day you live in that mess that you've accepted to just be normal is a day that you are costing yourself, you're costing the people in your life, you're costing the people that you're gonna have influence over, you're costing yourself something better that God has already set up for you. We got to have this moment where we're face down in the dirt, desperate in the mud, wrecked by our sin, realizing that everything that's happening right now in my life, I chose this. Man, we got to own it. That's why excuses are so easy. You can hide behind your excuse because it takes the spotlight off the real problem. Let me say this in love. The problem is you. We're the problem. I think it's what Paul's trying to get us to understand in Romans 3:23 when he says all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So listen, I'm not picking on you today, man. I'm right there with you. We are the problem. We will always choose self over substance. We want the Father stuff. We don't want the Father. This is sin. It's this corruption and this brokenness inside of us. And we know it. But we just keep thinking, if I just try harder, if I just get around the right people, if I just accumulate and earn, and no. The wages of that sin is death. That's what Paul says in 6:23. He says the wages is death. Now, death is a loaded word right here. It means a lot of different things. Death means physical death. Like we are dying, all right? So it's a new year. And you know what a new year means, depending on where you are in the age category, is that means things start to hurt for no reason. Friend of mine a couple weeks ago couldn't move their neck. What'd you do to your neck? I don't know. I just woke up. They're a little bit older than me. It's like, hey, it's coming. like our bodies are just, they're losing. There's a physical death that's happening inside of us, but it's not just physical death, it's a death of life. That's why we're so jacked up. That's why there's so much drama, is that things around us are constantly dying. But it's not just a death of life. It's not just a death of physical things, but it's a spiritual death that Paul's ultimately talking about, is that our decision to choose us over God, because that's what we're talking about today. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about stuff. I'm talking about your soul. I'm talking about that moment where we look at the God of the universe and say, you know what? I think I'm better than you. Now, we would never actually say that, right? I don't know anybody in my life that actually would look at me and say, you know what, I think I'm better than God. But we live that. Our lives is a reflection of that truth. Your life is a reflection of your greatest belief. And we believe that we're better off. And that comes with a cost. And that choice to choose us over God is eternal. And Paul says that we are separated from him forever because of our sin. And there ain't no excuse in this world that is going to save you from that. And that's what we're trying to get to, right? This understanding that I can't hide behind my excuses anymore. My excuses cannot save me, but let's be honest, that's not enough. It's not enough. To be wrecked by your sin, the reality that everything is happening is my fault, it only leaves us broken. It does not make us better. It doesn't. So we need something more. If you brought a friend today and you're like, why is he so angry? Is this going to be positive? Yes, this is where we get positive. Listen, I'm going to tell you some good news. You're going to have some bad news first, right? Because the good news ain't good unless you got some bad news where it can invade. So we need to be wrecked by something way more powerful than sin. And so here's what Jesus says in Luke 15. He says, when he finally came to his senses, I love that. That's the moment, right? He's like, all right, this is ridiculous. He comes to his senses. He says to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So what's he doing? He's practicing the speech. If you don't know what practicing the speech means, that means you are either an exceptional child or you are really bad at being bad. Because this is how this works. When you make a mistake and you got to come home, you better have a good speech. And listen, we tell this to students all the time. I'm just trying to be vulnerable and real. I don't know if this is good, but we tell them, listen, students, if you don't know which parent to talk to when you're in trouble, you're doing it wrong. Because there's always one, right? Some parents are like, listen, both my parents, they're just, and I'm just sorry. We'll pray for you, pray for some grace in your parents' heart. But there's that one parent who's like, listen, if I just say the right things, like he's practicing the speech. And so notice too, so he's working on the speech. And he says, I'm going to go home. Now, this is simple, but it's very profound. And you got to understand the culture. The people hearing this story would have understood this. Home is not just a place. Home is a relationship. It is where you are known. And the son is longing to be known. Isn't that all of us? Like, despite how well we think we know ourselves, and despite how well we think the people in our life know us, Isn't there a way to be known that exposes everything about us, and in that we don't feel shame, but we feel love? That's relationship. That's what it means to be home. That is what he is longing for. So as he is coming back home, he understands that he can't come back as a son. That's gone. That's off the table right now. But he doesn't even want to be a slave. He wants to come on as a hired servant. Now, you need to understand the difference here. A slave lived on the estate. They were fed from the table of the estate. A servant was hired. They lived in the city. They came into the estate to earn money. He wants to come in. He wants to come in as an outsider. He wants to earn his way back into the favor of the Father. And here's the problem when you're only wrecked by sin, because it's not enough. When you're only wrecked by sin, all you can see is what you've done, how far you've run from God, and all you can think about is what is it going to take to make it right? Because at its best, all that happens with sin is it breaks us, but it doesn't make us better. And I think for so many of us that are in this room and so many of us that are online, we can never seem to get past faith because we can't get past ourselves. And we've lost our way home because we've found our identity in our activity. We truly believe we are what we've done. That is who we are. We are our sin. We are the things that we have done and the things that have happened to us. This is now my identity, which is why when the son comes home, he doesn't see himself as a son. His identity has shifted into his activity. And so this is a really key part in the story because there's a crowd. Jesus is telling the story in Luke 15, and there's two different people in the space listening. There's Pharisees and there's sinners. Now, the best way I could describe a Pharisee to you is this. They're just better than me and you. All right, let me just give you one example. These are highly religious, guys that have figured out how do you take the excuses and make them work. These guys are just better than us. They've got the first 5 books of the Old Testament memorized. Word for word, line for line, memorized. Hey, listen, it's January 2nd. I know, listen, you've been starting that Bible in a year plan and things are gonna be going great, and then you're gonna get to Leviticus. You're gonna spend 2 days in Leviticus and go, you know what? 1 John, let's just go. Right, like this. We can't get through Leviticus. These guys memorize it. That's just, they're on a different space. And they're listening to this story thinking, get him, Jesus. The sermon better preach. And then on the other side, we got the sinners. These people are so bad that they've literally just been categorized. They're sinners. They completely understand the narrative of the story. Like if you want to talk about somebody relating to being face down into the dirt, this is them. And they're also asking the same question, both sides. What's it going to take to get back into the favor of the Father? What do I got to do to earn my way back? And here's why I love Luke 15. This is my favorite story. Luke 15 is not a story about a son. This is a story about a father. And if you'd let it today, if you'd let these words speak into your heart, I think what you would realize is that your life is not a story about you, but is the story about a father who loves you. It's got to be. When it's about me, when it's about you, all we're going to do is we're going to mess this thing up. We're going to constantly make us about ourselves. We got to have a story that's bigger than ourselves. This is not a story about a son's sin. This is a story about a father's love. And what's about to happen next is scandalous. It says, so he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. He saw him coming. and filled with love and compassion, it says that he ran to his son, he embraced him, and he kissed him, and he said to his son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I am no longer worthy of being called your son. But his father said to the servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house, put it on him, get a ring for his finger, and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but is now found. So the party began. What? What is happening right now? This is unfair. This is undeserved. This is grace. And the son's about to be wrecked by it. And did you catch what Jesus is saying? He says he was a long way off. And the Father saw him. Here's what you need to understand about grace, is that when it comes to grace, you don't have to go looking for the Father. Father knows exactly where you are. He sees you and he's coming for you. That is grace. So many times we allow the mess that we're in to somehow be this barrier that separates us from God. And here's what I want to tell you this morning. I don't know what mess you're in today, but wherever you're at, be there. Just be there. You don't need to fake it with God. He knows exactly where you are. And he sees you. And he's coming if you just let him. And so it says that the Father runs to the Son. Now this is crazy. In Middle Eastern culture, the Father does not run. This is not acceptable in society. The Father never runs. The fact that the Father takes off full sprint towards the Son says this: the Father has completely abandoned all emotions. And some of y'all, you found your identity in your activity, and you believe you are what you do, and you can't see yourself as a son and a daughter of the Father, and you're so deep in your shame, so caught up in your excuses of how are you going to explain yourself out of it, that you're not even able to look up and see that the Father is coming towards you. Man, I remember when my daughter Amelia was younger. She was like 4 or 5 years old, just that age where you just run recklessly all over the place with no care for your limbs or your head. And I remember she smashed into a cabinet, and there was this glass that broke, and so she instantly starts crying. Now, thankfully, she wasn't hurt, but she was scared, and then she was like, now I've done this thing. And at 5, she understands, hey, there's probably a consequence to this. So I'm running in full speed as fast as I can, and I'm probably just scared her, honestly. Like, here comes the pain. Scoop her up in my arms, and she just starts saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I remember I grabbed her by the face, and I said, I don't care what you broke. Are you okay? She was so caught up in being sorry that she didn't understand that Dad's not mad. Dad just wants to know if you're okay. And some of y'all, you got to get your head up and understand that the Father is coming. And he knows where you are. And he wants to wreck you with his grace. And do you know what the Father does next? He doesn't accept the apology. Son goes mid-sentence. I'm so sorry for what I've done. I don't deserve to be your, he's trying this speech, and the Father puts the hand over the mouth. Shut up. Robe, ring, shoes, steak. This is grace. This is the grace of God. And if you'll let it today, man, God wants to wreck you with it. Because that's the only thing that's going to change me and you. It's not sin. It's grace. And so Paul in his letter to the church in Ephesus says this: it's in him that we have redemption. We are redeemed not through our works. We are redeemed through him, through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses according to the riches of his grace, which he lavished upon us in all wisdom and insight. Grace that he lavished upon us. You and I are not defined by our dysfunction. You are not your sin. You are not that mistake you made when you were a teenager. You are not what that person did to you. You are not your shortcomings, and you are not your failures. You're not any of that stuff. We are not defined by our dysfunction. You and I are defined by our deliverance. And deliverance has a name, and his name is Jesus. And we are redeemed lavishly by his love. We are forgiven. We are restored. Robe, ring, shoes, steak. That's grace. Goodness, and he wants to give it to you today if you just let him. Just let him love you. And I'm pleading with you to do it. I've spent 34 minutes trying to just get you to believe it. Our default position as people who struggle is that somehow God is frustrated and disappointed with us. That we think that God is just tolerating our existence. No. And you're here today and you're a believer and you've been saved by grace. But somewhere between the altar and the door, you've got yourself buried in some kind of deep, dark sin, and you're saying to yourself, I gotta work hard to get myself out. No! That's the opposite of the gospel. Are you bound by your sin? Are you overwhelmed by the struggles in your life? What you gonna do? Well, I'm gonna work myself out. I'm gonna set my free. Stop it. You will not. You are no match for the power of sin and the power of hell. You will not overcome it. You cannot overcome it. In the end, you will just be another statistic. So what am I going to do? You got to let the Father catch you. It's not about stepping into anything. It's about letting him step into your space. He's coming. If you'll just look up. This grace that he lavishes upon us, it is offensive. If the grace of Jesus doesn't offend you, then you don't get it. It should be offensive. How could you love me despite what I've done and where I've been? It's in that moment that he puts his hands over our mouth and he says, look at me. You are mine. No matter what. No matter what. God does not regret saving you. There's nothing in your life that you have done that has surprised him. Your sin, past, present, and future, is not more powerful than the cross of Jesus Christ. And here's the thing, it doesn't matter how you came in here today. It's 2022, but can I tell you something? 2022 years later, God still saves, God still rescues, he's still faithful, he's still chasing after us. Our excuses change, but God doesn't. And it's time, church, that we stopped hiding behind them. You know what it means to be wrecked by grace? Can I tell you what it means to be wrecked by grace? It's realizing this. My excuses, they're no good at the foot of the cross. And that doesn't put me to shame. That sets me free. When the Father says, hey, you check the excuses at the door. They're not good in here. They're no good. I don't see your sin. I see you. And you are my child, and you were lost, and you're found. You were dead, and you're alive. And if you'll just believe it, if you'll just let that soak into your heart, that would actually change you. And here's the thing. I don't want you to be encouraged today. I don't want you to walk out of here and just feel good, because that does nothing. I want you to be different. What would happen if we actually believed that? What if we lived a life that was wrecked by grace? What if we spoke from it? What if we acted from it? What if we loved from it? What would that do? It's there. You don't even have to do anything for it. You just got to open up and you got to let him take you. So here's what's going to happen here in a moment. We're going to pray. And I'm going to invite you to step into that space. So if you're here today and you're a believer in the room and you've been saved by grace, but you haven't been living it, what a better day than January 2nd, 2022, first Sunday of the year, to say, you know what? I'm coming home. I'm coming home. And if you're in the room today and you're like, I don't even have a relationship with Jesus. He loves you. You were redeemed through his lavish grace. And he wants you to take it today. And then after we pray, we're going to stand and we're going to sing. And it's my hope that the words we sing become your prayer, that you would know that we can't go back to the beginning anymore. Like what we know now, we can't go back. Change or be a liar. That's our options today. Because in the middle of our crisis, he's there. And not for a second has Jesus ever forsaken you. And you know what's so great about this gospel? Is that no matter what you do, no matter where you've been, he will meet you there again and again and again and again. Church, we can't outrun the grace of God. And our sin cannot outwreck his love. Come on, I invite you to pray with me. As we bow our heads and close our eyes and enter into a moment where it's just honestly you and God right now. I'm going to ask you, if you're a believer in the room, let's address those of us first. What's it look like right now? How you doing? Let's stop playing games. Let's live this thing out. Let's be what he's called us to be, church. What a moment right now to just cry out to the God of the universe and say, you know what, I'm done running. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. But if you're here today and you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and today maybe for the first time ever you realize that you are wrecked in your sin and there is no hope in you. Hope has a name and his name is Jesus. And if you let him today, he could save you. What's that look like, Adam? Here's what it looks like. It's recognizing first and foremost that you're lost. There's no answer within yourself. It's understanding that Jesus gave his life for you on a cross, but most importantly, 3 days later, he walked out of a tomb to save you. And if you would believe it and you'd accept it, he could change you today. So if that's you, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to ask you just to pray with me. That you would repeat these words, that you would say this: Jesus, I'm a mess. I cannot fix myself. I am a sinner. And I need you to save me. I believe you lived. I believe you died. I believe you walked out of that grave for me. Right now, I give you my life. My heart is yours. From this day forward, I'm living for you. In your name, amen.